Hey, one more thing before you go. Have you ever wondered how a single journey can transform your entire life? In this episode, we dive into an extraordinary story of resilience, self discovery, and transformation. Our guest, Kirsten Rudberg, shares her deeply personal journey of growing up overseas with a mother battling profound depression and how these early experiences shaped her self perception and relationships. Stay tuned. We're going to hear this and many much more. I'm your host, Michael Hurst. Welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. Kirsten's story takes a remarkable turn with her decision to walk the Camino de Santiago, which we'll talk about. It's a pilgrimage that not only challenged her physically, but also led to profound emotional and spiritual breakthroughs. From the astonishing moment that inspired her to embark on this journey to the life changing message she received on a steep Spanish hill, Kirsten's tales are nothing short of magical. We're also going to explore her experience of compassionate possession. And again, we'll talk about that. A mysterious and terrifying event that later revealed its purpose. In a moment of crisis on the Camino, changing someone else's life in the process. Kirsten's adventures are filled with lessons of triumph, healing, and the power of human connection. And I can't wait to have this conversation. Welcome to the show.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
What an amazing journey, actually. It's, especially when you first contacted me, when you first pitched the show, it was interesting because, you mentioned depression and living with a person with depression right off the bat. And I know this is I dare to say issue because it isn't, I mean, it's an issue. It's an affliction that is worldwide and it's in every household in some form or another. And it affects everybody, whether you're rich, you're poor, you're old, you're young, you're middle aged, whether you're black, you're white, you're Asian, it doesn't matter. It's not selective. It's something that takes part in all of us, male, men, women, children, the whole gamut. So to grow up with that, I'm looking forward to this conversation as well. My mother suffered from depression for quite some time. We have other family members that currently deal with it as well, so I understand your journey. And I can't wait to hear how you've taken in what you could take in, and built an environment that brings a positive perspective to it.
It took a long time.
A long galaxy far, far away.
Yes, yes, truly. When you're a kid, you don't really know that anything's amiss, I guess. And added to the fact was the additional challenge that we were overseas. Because when it really started coming out was after the birth of my brother. I'm the oldest, my brother is the youngest of three. And we were in Pakistan. And we were in Pakistan because my father worked for a company that built hydroelectric dams and irrigation systems for developing countries. And so we'd go overseas for these long contracts where you'd have to be over there. And, as a kid, when things start falling apart and you're very young, you just you buckle down and you do what you need to do to survive. Kind of not even knowing that you're just doing it to survive. You do it because there is no other choice. And my mother, I know that she hates that part of her life. She really became profoundly depressed before the creation of drugs. When we came back to the States, her psychiatrist started putting her on everything that was invented at the time. And it wasn't until Prozac that anything had any effect on her and helped her. And she's actually been on Prozac since it was invented, so for decades. Um, but as a kid, it kind of, especially the addition of being in a culture and a country that, is so foreign and so alien, you kind of feel like there is no solid ground beneath you. And it's terrifying. And then, I had the added, both blessing and burden of having two younger siblings who were also, kind of distraught, having no idea what was going on, having no concept of why mom was locking herself in the bedroom for a week, or for days, or crying all the time. And so it was really, I mean, absolutely, growing up overseas changed my life forever, forever. but also engaging and living with a mother who was really struggling and in a lot of pain. Those kind of things just change you forever.
It does. And I think, growing up in a situation like that, it always gives us the opportunity as we get older to other recognize, the dysfunction in within that environment. I grew up with two alcoholic parents, and that it took me. I mean, as a kid, I saw it. Obviously, I saw it because I was the middle child, and it's kind of one of those things where I had to make the phone calls when they couldn't go to work, and I had to get my brother to school. My sister left when she was 16 when she had the opportunity to. I lived with my grandmother. So, when you grow up in these kind of environments, it creates the opportunity for that to have an effect on us negatively as well, like that. I think that, I mean, you say you grew up overseas, and you mentioned it earlier, but the perception of treating mental health from overseas, even in the European areas like England and France and Spain, are different than the United States. The same thing, and I can't imagine what it would be in something like Pakistan or any of the Asian countries in that regard. Can you help us understand a little bit what kind of effect that had on you and your family?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the challenge was my mother had developed another layer, I guess I should say, to the challenge was my mother had developed celiac disease, and this is before anyone even knew what celiac was. And so she was seeing, she was losing weight and losing weight and losing weight, and it got so bad that they flew her to Mayo Clinic from Pakistan. She'd gotten down to 90 pounds. Nobody could figure out what was going on. So it wasn't just mental; her health was really terrible, and it was really scary. And so, I know that our doctor, for example, in Pakistan, who was there, went to Stanford in the States, came back to Pakistan to practice, and he actually was doing a scope on her to see what was going on internally, and he lost part of the scope inside her body. And of course, that caused a whole kerfuffle of, what are they going to do? This thing's inside her body, and she had to, pass it naturally later. But let's just say that there weren't really very many good options over there. Let's just put it that way. It added a layer of complexity, all of that, especially the her physical ailments as well.
I'm sure that, yeah, that would definitely put a little wrench in lifestyle and everything about it. Obviously, she's a mother, she's a wife, she's in that situation, family wise too, and then having to go through this, and it's kind of crazy, wild. How did that experience kind of shape your self perception and your relationship with everybody actually? Because I know that and I say this because, and I'm asking this because from my position, it really shaped my life growing up with two alcoholic parents. I mean, it
Yeah.
shaped my perception of life and so forth. I don't drink. I don't drink, and not because of that. I don't I don't desire it.
Yeah.
Only because I watched what it did to both my parents. It's kind of one of those things. I've had wine. I can't say I don't drink at all. I drink wine at like dinner and not dinner, but like Christmas and Easter and things like that. You can't see my hand going Christmas and Easter. And I'm pointing to them all. the but yeah, I know it changes perception. How did that affect you? May I ask?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can say that the world for me, and I'm still trying to unpack it and have therapy even now, was a very unsafe place. I just never knew when my mother was going to lose it. Although,
Mhm.
as a child, you kind of learn to suss the room in general so that you can be safe and be protected. And so what happened for me with that, because certainly when we got back to the States, things were not all rosy. Things were not better. I mean, my mom finally got on a medication, but she had a lot of incredible trauma when she was a child. Incredible trauma. And those things kept playing out as I got older. And my father, they got a divorce a couple years after we came back to the States. So there was a lot of upheaval in my childhood, which then, of course, also caused me not to feel safe. And so I'd say at my very core, I've never felt safe. I've never felt safe in general, just in my life. And that's something I'm having to reconcile now, and try to find a space where I feel like I'm on even ground, where I can plant my feet firmly and feel like everything's going to be okay. For my entire life, I've been in fight or flight, because I, even when we came back to the States, I never knew, we lived with my mom during the school year, my dad during the summer. I never knew when my mom was going to lose it and just unleash on me. And I was kind of her, her, when she'd have the pressure building with whatever was going on, I was the pressure valve. So when she lost it, everything came on me, everything over and over and over again. And I had to take it because I was the oldest, and I'd rather it came on me versus my brother and sister. They were a lot younger, and they had trauma from growing up in a household like that. I was the only one who seemed to like keep it together in the family. My brother and sister both had therapy very early on, and my parents kind of decided I didn't need it because I was putting, I kind of maintained that everything was okay when it wasn't. Internally, I was just falling apart and breaking apart. But I knew I had to do that to survive. I had to put up this front to show everybody that I wasn't going to be a problem and I was going to be okay. And I've done that my whole life, and it's been exhausting. It's been such a terrible burden. It has been something that has broken my heart over and over again. And, my mother and I still struggle to this day. We have good months, we have bad months, we have good years, we have bad years. But basically, when I graduated from college, I stayed in the Chicago area for a couple years and then I left. I did not go back home for years. And, everybody thought, why don't you come back home more often? And I just didn't have a desire. I just wanted to be away from that dynamic, from that family dynamic, and from that grief that, being around family brought up for me.
from that perception. Did you grow up when you came back to the States? Did you grow up in Chicago?
Yeah, outside Chicago. Yeah, in a
Outside
suburb.
Chicago? You just mentioned college. I usually start at the beginning. I missed that. We jumped right in. I usually start at the beginning. So I know that you were overseas, but when before you guys went overseas, where did you grow up?
In the same suburb outside of Chicago for like a couple years.
A couple of years, and then the traveling started all over.
All the
Now that
traveling.
travel all overseas, was it just in third? But they're not really third world countries, but Pakistan, that's part of Asia, correct? So did you just travel in that arena, or did you also travel in the European Union
Oh gosh. Well, my dad was doing big World Development Bank stuff, so it was always in countries that needed assistance or
assistance?
help. I mean, the, some people would argue that it was colonization, but I was in Guyana in South America for a few years, and then of course, going to and fro all over the planet, we went everywhere. I mean, Bangladesh, Thailand, Sri Lanka, the Maldives. I mean, I everywhere, but mostly I would have to say the majority was in Asia Pacific. Yes.
From that arena? And I mean, that has its benefits as well for somebody growing up because you get to
Oh,
understand different cultures and the history, and you get to walk history, and you get to walk
yes.
and talk the cultures that you have visited. It's not just a read it in a book or see it on TV.
Yeah.
It gives you that. It gives you that.
Absolutely. And I tell everybody that the greatest gift, even though growing up overseas was challenging and difficult and filled with a lot of sorrow, the greatest gift my parents could ever give me was having me grow up overseas, because I went to school with kids from everywhere, all over the globe: Germany, Canada, Vietnam, Pakistan itself, everywhere you could imagine. I went and got to know kids from all of those places. And, we didn't care what religion people were, what they ate for dinner, how they showed up in the world. We just wanted to play and have fun. And that kind of experience changes your life irrevocably. And I have to say, it is the reason for so much of what I'm doing these days, and what I've done in my life, which is engage in a lot of projects to introduce, kind of get rid of othering. Because when you're a kid and you understand that we're all essentially the same, and that we all just want to have fun and get through the day, but mostly have fun, it changes you forever. And that is what I do today. It's a part of why I do my podcast. It's part of why I do my other projects. Yeah, I can't say enough. Even though growing up overseas was challenging and heartbreaking, the gift that my parents gave me around that, I will never be able to thank them enough for that.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I would absolutely say that was a gift. You went to college, you went to university. Would you go? For, would you, simple question. What would you want to be when you grew
Oh
up?
my gosh, are you kidding? I had no idea. No idea. Although, it is interesting. I read this book by this depth psychologist once, and he, put forward this proposition that said, what you do as a child is what you secretly want to do as an adult. So when I was a kid, when we came back to the States, I set up this fake Italian restaurant in my parents' basement, and I made menus and stuff and walked around and took people's fake people who were invisible, their orders and stuff like that. And so, part of my life has been working in the service industry, working in coffee shops and restaurants and that kind of thing. The other thing I did was discover my mom's 45s. And so I remember until she confiscated them and said, please don't ruin these. I did a whole, like I'd practice with our tape recorder and do shows and pretend to be a DJ. And so I have my own podcast now. I think it is utterly fascinating. When I was a kid, I just wanted to write. I wanted to be an author. I wanted to have fun. I wanted to be creative, whatever that looked like. I wanted to play in that arena. And so I'm sort of doing it now, and it's kind of fun.
That's pretty cool, actually. You know what? The common thread that I see with individuals that have grown up in an environment like you grew up and I grew up, I see a common thread through those conversations in regard to wanting to be creative and in escaping either to write or to act or to sing or to, you know, anything along the creative field that they can, it's like an escape. When I was a kid, my escape was going to go to the movies. So every chance and opportunity I had, I went to the movies. And, that's where I could just get away from the dysfunction and, pretend to be somebody else I saw up on the screen instead of the environment that I was in. And we had good memories as well. I mean, it's like anybody. You have, like you said earlier, you have your good and you have your bad. It wasn't all completely compounded with bad upon bad upon bad, but it gives you the opportunity to kind of go from there. So I find that I, you, I find that kind of a sisterhood, brotherhood, sisterhood within that realm. We all end
Absolutely.
up here.
Yeah.
um, can you? Where did? Yeah, I know that you grew up in outside the Chicago area. Can you tell me about the walk that you did with Camino? Uh, I have to look at my notes for this because I didn't remember it. Camino de Santiago.
Yeah, absolutely. This it's very interesting how I came about it. And for those who don't know, the Camino de Santiago is an ancient pilgrimage route for Catholics. I am not religious; I'm a panentheist, but it's an ancient route and panentheists believe that everything is sacred and everything has worth. It's an ancient pilgrimage route for Catholics. There are so many different ways to get to Santiago, and it's called the Way of St. James. And you can walk from Switzerland, you can walk from Italy, you can walk from France. And Spain has, I think, 5 different routes. The most famous is the Le Puy route. It's known as the party route. So you can walk a mile and have an espresso, walk another mile, have a glass of wine. It's for, tens of thousands of people do it every summer, and every route is different. Some are more arduous, some go over mountains, some are easier, some are along the seaside, And so I walked the Camino, and the way I got to walk the Camino was really interesting, not being religious. I went to a feast day at a church outside of Portland, Oregon, with my then partner. And the woman sitting next to me was a carbon copy of my best friend who died the year before of a really rare form of Parkinson's. And from her jewelry to her hair and everything. And I thought, oh my goodness, this woman looks so much like Linda. It's freaking me out. And at the end, we ended up talking because there was food. And so we were all sitting around and talking. And she said, she was a Presbyterian minister. And she said, I'm going to walk the Camino next year. And I thought, I don't even know what that is. That's weird. And so my partner was Catholic. And I think he saw I was intrigued. So a few weeks later, he bought me these travel guides for the Camino. And I thought, oh, I mean, this is cool. I can just like read and see what it's like. And thank you so much. I mean, this is not for me, but I appreciate that you thought of me. That's really nice of you. And so then a few months more go along, and I'm having my life. And a dear friend, one of my best friends, calls me and says, "Hey, I just saw this movie that was amazing. I love it. And I just feel like you have to have it or you should watch it." And this is, I'm going to date myself. She said, "I'm going to mail you the DVD." And I thought, okay, that's weird. Okay, that's really weird, but I'll watch it when you send it. And I opened the envelope when I got it, and it was The Way by Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez. And it's about three or four pilgrims that walk the Camino. And I thought, oh, weird that you sent that to me, but I guess like I have another way to see what it's like and see what it's all about. Thank you. Thank you for sending that to me, but again, that's not me. I don't do that. And so life went along several more months, and I was at my acupuncturist, and out of nowhere he said, my mom just walked 300 miles and she just broke her ankle on the Camino. And I thought, what? I said, "Am I the only person who doesn't know this thing exists? How is this possible?" So then we have a long conversation about the Camino and what his mother's doing. And I just thought that's really interesting. And I'm starting to get my ears perked up at this point. And then about 6 months after that, another dear friend who was in Kansas, her mother had been moved to an Alzheimer's care unit. She was closing down the house. Her mom was a pack rat. She was closing down the study and going through every last piece of paper. She said, "Okay, you're going to think I'm bonkers, but I was cleaning out my mom's study and I found this piece of paper that I just am getting. I'm supposed to send this to you. I'm supposed to mail it to you, and I don't know why, but you're going to be getting something from me in a few days." She's like, "I'm sorry. I know this is weird, but I'm sending it to you." And I said, "Okay, that's fine." And I get it a few days later, and it's a travel guide for the Camino from the 1960s. And I just thought to myself, what is going on? What is happening right now? And I sat down on the bed, and I decided to pull a tarot card. And the card that came up was, "You're not listening to the messages we've been sending."
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, are you joking? Okay. I looked up at the sky and I said, "I am not religious. I'm not Catholic, by the way. I have a job. I can't leave my job. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right for months." Because a lot of people just do it for a week or two. I'm like, I'm going to go all in. So I'm going to have to, in my house, who's going to watch my animals? I mean, I was really wrestling with it. And my partner thought I was bonkers. He's like, "You're bonkers. What are you talking about?" And then after a couple weeks, I thought to myself, okay, this is weird. This is weird, but obviously I'm supposed to do this. And it just started feeling more and more right over time. And then one day I just said, okay, all right, I will do this. Okay. This is absurd, but I will do it. And the second I decided to do it, every obstacle that was before me completely blew away.
Wow.
And I found a place to stay in Barcelona because I took a ship from Miami to Barcelona. I wanted to be really intentional and not be like a chicken with my head cut off. I ended up doing it for like 2.5 to 3 months. I walked 500 miles. And
Wow.
I started in a different place. I wanted one that was more contemplative and more thoughtful. So I started in southern France, in Arles, where Van Gogh painted, and I walked north. I walked up towards the French northern coast, and then walked a little bit along the Spanish countryside. So
Wow.
yeah,
I would probably follow you. So that would be the exact way I need to go. But it sounds like the universe was kind of giving you a little NCIS reference, a give slap.
yes,
Like, wake up. You
yes,
know, I'm trying to tell you something. That's pretty.
yes.
That's pretty profound, actually. I think that that opportunity that you were given and the opportunity that put you in that place at that time. What was that experience like once you got on that journey?
Well, I was on the ship. I took the Norwegian Epic from Miami to Barcelona, and in the middle of the ocean, I woke up in my stateroom and I thought, what am I doing? What am I doing? Am I crazy? I'm doing this by myself. I don't speak French. I don't speak French. Then I sat back and I thought, okay, all right, Kirsten, no matter how bonkers this seems, you would not be asked to do something like this if something bad was going to happen. I mean, just stay with the idea that everything's going to be okay and you're going to be okay. And so I have to tell you, I got to Barcelona, took 3 trains to southern France, started walking, and walked and walked and walked. And let me tell you, there's nothing better than being able to eat like 30 chocolate croissants a day and still lose weight. I ate a really heavy pack. I would, it was scary sometimes because, oh, by the way, France had the worst weather it had had in 90 years. So it snowed on me in May, it hailed on me. So most of the pilgrims quit walking. And so my route was already known for how solitary it was. Everyone quit. So I was like the only person a lot of the time. Um, but I always felt safe. I was always taken care of. And if I ever needed something, someone would come in and take me to the place that I needed to go, or, speak French so that I would be able to understand who was speaking to me. Um, it was the most difficult thing I've ever done because I did it alone. So many people stopped me and said, "Are you doing this alone as a woman in France through this really, really solitary, through the woods and villages that were really small?" And I said yes, and they just could not believe it. And I guess up until that point, I had understood that it was a little dicey what I was doing, but I always knew, like I had complete confidence and faith that I wouldn't have been asked to do something if it was going to get me in trouble. I met lots of amazing people in the villages and incredible, incredible. Like, I have never been treated better in a foreign country. The French people were so good to me and so loving and so expansive with the way they took care of me. I can't even explain it. It was the most bonkers thing ever. I really had a movie version of the Camino.
Very cool. I mean, that's again, that's like I said earlier, that's kind of profound in that regard. You got the opportunity. I am Catholic, but I'm not a practicing Catholic, so I can't say that. I grew up Catholic.
Okay.
I'm no longer practicing Catholic. I haven't practiced Catholicism. That's, we just made that word up. What do you think? um, I have not practiced being a Catholic for like since I was a kid. We left the church basically at an early age because when my parents got divorced, they excommunicated my mom, and we went to live with my mother. And so she couldn't go to church. See, that ages me a little bit. She didn't go to. Well, I still have my hair, so it's okay. The we couldn't go to church either. And as kids, we're kind of going. I thought you're supposed to be there for us,
Yeah.
and you're shutting the doors to us because of what my parents did, not what we did. So yeah, I'm a spiritual individual now, and I've never looked back. I'm
Yeah.
one of those things. Um, Plus, look, I'm happy to hear that you had that kind of an experience in France. That's our go-to place that my wife and I went to. That's our. I'm not going to say bucket list. I'm not going to say bucket list because that's at the end of what you
Yeah.
want to do. But that is something that we absolutely are striving for. We even looked in property out there. So
Jealous.
it,
Jealous.
it it's we have two wonderful, intelligent, beautiful young ladies as daughters, and Diane's parents. She's got a stepfather, and her mother are still alive. Her father passed away. He had Lewy body dementia, and he was diagnosed with Parkinson's first, but it turned out to be Lewy body dementia, and they just kind of misdiagnosed him. Um, but we thought, if we moved to France now, then we'd probably never see our kids,
Yeah.
kind of a thing. And
Yeah.
I still have to walk my youngest down the aisle.
Okay.
I have to.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
um, but that's our go-to place. That's where we want to. That's where we want to visit. So, 30 croissants a day, absolutely. When you said that, I'm sitting there going, "Yes, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that." Uh, what kind of a once you completed that, did you have any profound? I keep using that word. I got to change that word. Did you have any amazing spiritual happenings while you were walking this route? Not from maybe a religious perspective, not trying to go that route, but did you have any kind of a realization while you were on this walk that helped you where you're at today?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I think this does go back to my childhood, which you could, I've told you a lot about that already. But I always choose partners that don't approve of me and who really clamp down on me and try to control me. And that was kind of like what my relationship was like with my mother as a kid. I think her life was kind of out of control, and she felt like she needed to control a lot of things. And I think, obviously our relationship was not great. There was a lot of trauma in it. So I kind of model my relationships on with partners that I don't feel safe with, because that's what I'm comfortable with. And so my partner at the time, still the gentleman who was Catholic and gave me the brochures for the Camino. My partner at the time basically, I hadn't realized it yet, but it was my, one of my last days walking the Camino. I was so dehydrated, because they say don't walk the Camino in July and August. And I was walking it, and I thought, I'm going to walk along the Spanish coast. It's not going to be that hot. Well, it was hotter than hell. And I got so dehydrated after a few days, I stopped going to the bathroom. I don't think I realized what bad shape I was in, but I was crawling up the side of this Spanish kind of cliff in the woods, sort of. And there was no one else around. And, the ocean's down there, the woods are all around me. I'm climbing up this really steep cliff with my heavy pack on my back. I was sick, and I didn't realize it from not drinking enough water. And I just broke. I broke. And I howled out into the wilderness. I mean, I just howled. And my first thought was, oh gosh, I hope no one heard me. And then the second one was, oh my gosh, he will never let me stop walking this. And I thought, what? Oh my gosh, he was back in the States. And I thought, where did that thought come from? And that was the beginning of me understanding that, oh my gosh, I've given all my power away. This is my trip. This is my Camino. This is my journey. But in some way, I'm feeling like I have to do it for him or something. I mean, it was the most bizarre thought. And it was the first time that I had an indication that I'd given all my power away. And even though the Camino was something I wanted to do in other areas of my life, I was just overcome with being in a relationship where I was comfortable, was modeled on the one that I had with my parents, with my mother especially. And so, and the third thing I thought was, oh, Kirsten, you hate this. I mean, in the movies, this is so banal. I can't believe you howled in the wilderness. Everybody does this in every movie. It's so boring. You're so predictable. Ugh, couldn't it have been something more exciting? But yeah, no, it was just me screaming in the woods. And then I thought, I hope no one heard this. And then, I got up after I dusted myself off, and I'm, stumbling through the woods still. And these two very nervous French hikers walked past me. They heard me. They were too polite to say anything, but they heard me, and they were like, hi there. How you doing? Yeah. You okay?
Yeah, that's like they're going, do we come out of the woods or do we stay here?
Yes. Yes.
I do understand that. Yes, I do. How did that help you to recenter your I won't say stories, but your life around like a health? And we all go through health issues as we grow older, especially, but we all go through health issues through many parts of our life, and there's always that. I've been through 8 operations, and I had to reach deep down inside myself during each one of those to really make myself aware of the things that I needed to do, the things that were important to me, and why I needed to come out of this in a positive way. Did that help? Did you change in any form like that?
Oh my gosh, I move at the speed of a slug. Of course not. It took me like, I got back to the States, was with him for another couple of years. We broke up when I decided to get my Master's of Divinity, and I moved to Santa Fe. And then I got right into a relationship in Santa Fe that was exactly the same as the last one. And I was with that gentleman for 7 years. And it really took pretty egregious behavior on his point near the end of our relationship for me to understand,
Yeah.
or to even kind of approach, why is this okay? Why am I saying and accepting this behavior? And by the way, why am I not honoring myself? Why am not I not worth respect or dignity? And that's when I started to unpack over these last couple of years of being single, And I love being single, by the way. It's like the best thing ever. I do everything on my own time. I have no one else telling me what to do. Makes me feel amazing. But I've needed this time to kind of examine, like, where did this all come from? How it has governed my life and how it's kept me stuck. And so I'm in the middle of doing all the work that I need to do so that I can actually love myself, which is a lot harder.
Yeah.
It's harder work than we are led to believe.
Well, especially when you come from an environment that always, pushes you down into a position that you can't have the correct self-esteem and that you
Right.
can accomplish something and that you are worthy and that you can do something and that you can move forward and that you're worthy of love. And when I say you, I'm not directing that to you in
Right.
specific. This is to everyone out there. You get, and I'm not a doctor, but I went through similar things that you went through. Again, you get pushed into a position where you don't get the self-esteem boost that you need to get from there, the confidence you need to get from your parents. You don't get the pat on the back or the shove in the right direction or the advice you need to do about life or which way do I go or which thing do I do and things like this. So it's difficult for us, I think, when we come from an environment like that to recognize that we are worthy and that we do need to move in a positive way and that we need to do it confidently, build the strength within ourselves, believe in ourselves, and take those steps to improve our environment and ourselves. So I'm glad that you're taking those steps and that you're moving forward. It's a difficult journey.
It is. It is a difficult journey, and it's it's a 24/7 hour a day journey, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
It
You
is.
have to be vigilant, because essentially what I'm needing to cultivate, I think I can't say enough for my resilience because I came out of a really difficult childhood and I'm mostly joyful and okay now. But there are parts of that voice inside of me that are not helpful that I need to work on.
Well, it's. I think we all are guilty of that. Because we're human beings, and
Yeah.
sometimes the little thing in our brain tells us to go back to what we were comfortable with
Oh yeah.
way back when. So I say it's taking that first step is important, and
Yeah.
maintaining that step in a forward direction is difficult. But as long as you put the right people in place that help you either push you up from behind or pull you from the front or hold your hand as you're walking,
Yeah.
that journey, then it improves it. So hopefully you have the right individuals around you that are helping you to empower yourself to do what you need to do. And for
Yes.
everybody else out there that's in this community, you need to do the same thing. Recognize that you need, there's a time and a place to ask for help, and look around. There are people, there are those that will be there for you. You just didn't know they were.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
did you have any other? I mean, it's a long walk. It's a long journey. Did you have any other magical moments along that journey?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, for example, I one night, oh my goodness gracious. So first of all, because the weather was so terrible, a lot of the hostels and auberges were closing down because there just were no pilgrims to fill them. So a lot of owners were just deciding to close down. So there was one night I was coming out of Montpelier and I could not find a place to sleep. Now, when you do the Camino, you're not supposed to bring, a bedroll, a tent, a sleeping bag, all of this stuff. But I thought to myself, I'm going to be prepared for everything that could go wrong. So that's why my pack was way heavier than a lot of others. So coming out of that town, I could not find a place to live to save my life, like at all. And so one night I camped in the French forest. Um, I just thought, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to do this," and I climbed back in the forest, found a little glen that I thought would be safe, and pitched my tent, slept in the forest, which is bonkers, and in the middle of the night, something walked past my tent, and it wasn't an animal. It sounded, it was nighttime, it was slightly raining, I had the rain fly up and everything. Something walked past my tent, it woke me up, it scared me, it sounded like a human. I did not open the tent to see what it was. I just prayed to God that whatever it was that walked past the tent didn't see me. I mean, I was praying to God that they didn't see me. They kept walking. And then in the next morning, I got up and there was a white feather on my tent. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take this as a sign that I'm protected. And, I didn't sleep very well. here's another gorgeous moment. So I went to the next town, which was a UNESCO heritage site, and I'm going to butcher the name, St. Guilherme in the Desert. That's not how you say it, but I'm butchering the name. And I decided, since everything was soaking wet because I'd been in the rain all night, that I was going to stay in a hotel. And so I found this hotel that was relatively cheap in a 700-year-old building or something. And the day I was leaving, I stayed there a few days just to explore the village. The woman down in the breakfast place, she said, "So what are you doing, and what is your purpose here, and why do you have a backpack?" So we had a conversation, and before I knew it, before I left, she brought me a huge hamper of food and breads and cheeses to put in my pack, to feed me. And that happened to me over and over and over again on the Camino. French people took care of me, and they hugged me, and they, wanted to know what was going on and if I was okay. And then they do something to take care of me over and over and over again. It was astonishing.
That's amazing. That's magical in itself. It shows that you can have faith in humanity,
Yes.
especially in
That's
what's
my
going on in the
superpower.
world. Exactly. And the white feather, that helped as well.
Yes.
Um, Speaking of something like that, because I think a white feather, any kind of feather that you find, is supposed to be a message from the heavens that you're being watched and taken care of, and everything's going to be okay. You mentioned, and I'm interested in understanding what this is. You mentioned a compassionate possession experience that initially terrified you. Can you help us understand what a compassionate possession experience is?
Yes, it wasn't until multiple years later that I actually had someone explain to me what it is. So I mean, what happened was, and I'll tell two stories really fast. So when I turned 40, my father and sister came out to see me in Bend, Oregon to visit me. And it was the first time they were meeting my partner. I was turning 40. I was beside myself. I was a wreck. I hadn't been sleeping for several weeks. I just felt this huge buildup of energy. I just felt like I was going a little bonkers, frankly. I felt really uncertain. I was crying all the time. I don't know if it was because I was turning 40 or what was going on, but I was just beside myself. And this, I want to preface this story by saying I am not giving myself an out, and I'm not excusing myself for my behavior, but this is how I experienced what happened. So this is the first time that it happened. So we were all out to breakfast. I came in from being outside because I was having an anxiety attack because I could not deal with what was going on with me. And I came in and walked up to the table and said, stood there. And then it felt like my brain was, like, my consciousness was shoved aside. And the conscious part of my brain was like, what is happening? What's going on? I don't know what's going on. And then I started saying something so terrible to my sister that was so appalling. It destroyed the entire vacation, and so mean. I mean, they were like, we're never coming to see you again. I mean, it just destroyed everything. It was so bad. My partner was like, what just happened? And I was left with, really, what just happened, because I don't say things like that. I would never say anything like that. I try to be really careful with my word. And I spent the next 6 months wondering if I was going insane, if I should be put in a mental hospital, crying almost every day because I hadn't understood what happened, and feeling utterly betrayed and alone, and just devastated. I didn't know what had happened. Now, the second time was about a year and a half later. I was in my restaurant where I was working early one day. This guy came in. He had a book. He was really grumpy. It was really early. And I thought, for some reason, he's not talking to me. He's the only one in here. I'm going to make him talk to me. And I just felt really certain about that. I'm like, this is going to happen. So I walked up to him and I said, "Oh, what book are you reading?" And he said, "Oh, it's a book on math and logic." And then that thing came in again, because the conscious part of me that was still thinking, my consciousness said, "Oh my gosh, that thing is happening again." And then this sentence came out of my mouth that I had, didn't really know before. And the conscious part of me said, "Oh my God, how does this sentence end?" Whatever it was, I said, "Oh, so do you think math is invented or discovered?" And his jaw dropped, and we had the most amazing conversation. Just incredible, off to the races. So much so that when he left, I was so bummed, because I was like, this is like my new best friend. Why did he leave? And then he came back the next day. And he said, "I had to come back and tell you what happened yesterday." He said, "I am flabbergasted. I just don't even know how to tell you." He said, about 2 minutes before you came over and you asked me that question, I had just finished 5 pages on whether math was invented or discovered. And he said, I cannot get over what happened. It is so bizarre, but he said, I think we're supposed to be friends. And we were friends. He was from Denver. And we just started an email friendship that ended up being really fruitful and beautiful and fun and really lovely. It turned out to be just a really dear, deep friendship. Um, but yeah, so then I came to Santa Fe and I saw a shaman here. And I said, I just want to ask you something because this has happened to me twice. And I explained to her what happened. And she said, oh, that happens all the time. She said that's compassionate possession. And it's like when an angel or a spirit guide, they either like want to get you on the right path or there's a message that they need to get to this person that you're talking to. They need to know something. They will just like kind of briefly enter, say what they have to say, and then leave. Often leaving people very, but she said that's it's really common. It happens all the time. And I thought, what?
That's crazy.
What?
Yeah, that's crazy. Now, I understand the second one and how that plays a factor into that. But the first one, didn't that create a rift with your family? Wasn't that kind of a negative experience?
Oh, yes. Oh my God, it was so bad. It was so bad. But that whole experience tied into what I experienced on the Camino, how I changed that woman's life.
Mm,
Um, so, I mean, I can tell you briefly if I have time.
yeah,
Is there time? Yeah,
absolutely.
okay. So I was walking on the Camino and my knee was bothering me. And so I decided to take a bus to the next station or to the next hostel because it was over the mountains and I knew I was going to be able to do it. So I basically went to the bus station, sat there for forever, and turned around. The bus didn't run on Wednesdays, so I went back to where I slept the night before, and I met this woman, and I'll call her Stephanie. And so Stephanie and I became friends, and we ended up walking a few days in a row. The weather was terrible. And we all ended up with another pilgrim in this really small village in this tiny little house. And it was the three of us at dinner. And Stephanie was kind of a sourpuss and super negative and really down on France and everything to do with France and all sorts of stuff. And I just, said, gosh, I mean, that's not my experience. This is my experience. And, she was at the end of a rope, and when you're on the Camino, you usually break once, as is evidenced by my story. She was at the end of her rope. She just got so angry. She shot up from the table. She started screaming at me. She was crying and sobbing hysterically. The chair went shooting across the room. She was so angry and enraged, and she just left and went to go smoke a cigarette. And the other pilgrim said, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to leave. I don't want to, I'm going to go to bed now." And I thought, I hate conflict because it terrifies me because I grew up with it. But I thought, Kirsten, you can't leave. You cannot leave. You have to stay here and have a conversation with her. I don't want her to feel bad. And so that's when I started praying and I just said, please, please let me know what to say because this needs to be reconciled like in some way and I can't run away because I make an art of running away. I'm very good at it. But I was like, this is the time I cannot run away. So she came back in still crying and she said, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I did that. I'm so sorry. And she was so ashamed and humiliated. And all of a sudden I said, oh my gosh. Okay, look. One time I said something to my sister and dad that was so horrific and hurtful and terrible that it left a 50-mile wide diameter of nuclear devastation around where we were. And I said, so this that you just did is nothing. This is nothing. What I did ruined people's lives. And she said, really? And I said, oh, yeah, yes, I ruined people's lives. So you do not have to worry about what just happened here. I did something far worse. And so you could see the shame melting away. You could see the humiliation and those heavier negative energies melting away. And we ended up having like a really good conversation for the next 2 hours. And she just wanted to explain herself and why she was in the state that she was in. And then a few days later, we were walking and we got to this town and we were going to go our separate ways. And she said, let's meet for lunch tomorrow. And I said, okay. And so we met for lunch. And one thing you need to know is that on the Camino, all the pilgrims have a coquillo, which is this shell, the sign of the pilgrim that you attach to your backpack. So people know that you're walking the way. And I could not find one. It was a weird year where there are no shells anywhere. And I'd been walking for about 6 weeks at that point. And I was very disappointed not to have the shell. And so she met me at lunch and she said, I want to tell you The place where I'm staying has a ton of these, and I made this for you. So she took a shell, she ground a hole in it and attached a rope to it. And she said, I want you to have this. And I was just thrilled. It was my own coquilla, my own shell. And I was just so excited. And we had lunch and I said goodbye and we gave each other great big hugs. And it wasn't until a couple days later, because I'm dense and slow, that I realized that that shell, that gift was this thank you, this benediction from God or spirit or the universe or the energy saying, good job. You showed up for another person when they were in distress, when they were suffering, when they were having a bad day, and you spoke with grace, you spoke with authenticity, you were vulnerable, and you helped take away another person's shame and humiliation. You basically showed up for someone else on the Camino. So here's your shell. This is the true sign of the pilgrim. And I thought to myself, I was blown away when I understood that I would have never been able to be present to Stephanie and take away her shame, her humiliation, never any of it, unless I had had that first experience with compassionate possession, unless I had suffered and suffered and suffered for months, thinking I was crazy, not knowing why the experience happened, only for it to serve its purpose several years later so that I could help someone else. And at that point, I thought to myself, all right, okay. I mean, now I know that sometimes suffering is necessary and these lessons are necessary. And if I can suffer for someone else to be present to them or do something for them in the future, I will suffer every single time because it was such a powerful experience.
That's amazing. It's a great, both great stories. I think that sometimes when the universe touches us in that way, it's always a remarkable opportunity for us to not only look within ourselves, but also to share that outside of that environment so that we can understand that there is more to life and more to the universe. We just need to open our eyes and our ears and our heart.
Yes. Yes. I agree.
Yeah,
Two
yeah.
thumbs
It's
up.
two thumbs up. Which one's Robert and which one's Ebert? Robert, is that right? Yeah, that's the right names. I had to think about it for a minute. Anyway, the hopefully it's both of them putting their thumbs up. We'll say both because I think they both passed.
Love
Maybe
it.
they
I
didn't.
love that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So with everything that you've learned along that pathway and everything you learned in your journey along these things, I mean, do you continue giving that back, and how do you help other people if they are feeling stuck or overwhelmed and with their past experiences or anything along that line? How do you help them move forward? What advice do you give them?
Well, honestly, like one of my works is my podcast, Bite Sized Blessings. And basically, I interview everyone under the sun. It started during COVID, but because I've had all these experiences of they're kind of uncanny and strange and inexplicable, other people love to hear these stories. They're just
Right.
in love with them. And so I thought, you know what? I bet other people have stories like this. And I thought, oh my goodness, if I do a podcast about these things, how is it going to help other people? How is it going to make their hearts feel? How is it going to help their souls feel? And guess what? I started a podcast during the pandemic because everybody was really lonely and isolated and sad. And I made it Bite Sized Blessings. I ask everyone under the sun, and it's a lot of work. As you well know, a podcast is no joke. It is a lot of work. Um,
That it
and I just
is.
asked them, yeah, have you ever witnessed or experienced something that you consider magical, miraculous, or mysterious? And I've had so many messages from people saying, I needed to hear this. This was exactly what this is the message I needed this week. This is something I needed to be reminded of because it's all about connecting people with the idea that
Yeah.
there is a lot more going on in this reality than we even can conceive of. And we need to start waking up to that. We need to start understanding that so we can co-create with these energies, whatever it is out there. I'm not saying I have the answers, but they want to like work
Yeah.
with us. And I think me getting all those signs for the Camino and deciding to walk it is a great example of me deciding to co-create and accept the invitation because
Yeah.
we're always getting invitations in our lives. So yeah, my podcast is one of them. I went to seminary. I have a master's of divinity. I'm ordained in the Church of Universal Interfaith because I'm at my heart an interfaith pastor. I endlessly counsel or listen. I'm a licensed spiritual director. But mostly I'm a creative. So I have my 3 books. I'm rewriting the Peter Rabbit book series. It's more forcefully engaging with what's happening in the world these days, environmental degradation, sweatshops. The first one is off of Peter Rabbit. The second one is a rewrite of Squirrel Nutkin. The third one, Boom Chicka Meow Meow, is a rewrite of The Tailor of Gloucester. And I'm dealing with the way that we're engaging with the environment, with other humans, with everything, and how, we're really struggling to be responsible and good stewards of lots of different things: animals, humans, the environment. And they're very, some of them are very dark, but they're also funny, and they always end with a message of hope. Because I think at the end, there's always hope, because we can always change things and make things better. And so I'm always doing creative things. I can't stop. I cannot stop.
Well, that's what we mentioned earlier. That's where we go. That's just what we do. You
Yeah.
also have a YouTube channel, by the way, so that everything
Yes.
on this. For those of you watching, obviously you can see that everything is here. But if you're listening to the audio portion of this, then how can somebody get in touch with you with your website that has all of
Oh,
this?
yes, exactly. Yeah, my website has all this information. There's an email address on there. If you want, just go on over, take a gander, see what you think. I'm always looking for guests. So reach out if you want to be a guest. But yeah, everything you probably want to know, maybe too much, is on the website.
And that's bitesizeblessings.com, correct?
Yeah, yes, and it's BYTE, because every episode has either the long form interview or the little bite sized nugget of just the magical or miraculous occurrence.
Outstanding. And I'll make sure that and a link will be in the show notes, so it's easy just to kind of click it and they'll take it right to it. And the wonderful world of digital media make it
Yay.
instantaneous for you. You also have an Instagram. Can they connect with you there?
Absolutely. Anywhere. I mean, I have Edison Sucks one, because I can't stand Thomas Edison. I'm a Tesla fan all the way, for various reasons. Yes, I'm a nerd. I've been reading science magazines since I was a kid. So I'm an inveterate science. I love to learn, and will hopefully learn for the rest of my life, because I'm endlessly curious. So, yes, please feel free. Reach out. I'd love it.
Absolutely. And that also is there here on the screen as well. What's your handle?
Um, Edison Sucks one, Kirsten Rudberg. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll make sure that's in the show notes as well and on the webpage when they go to it. So, Kirsten, thank you very much. What a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you connecting with me, and I hope that we've been able to motivate and inspire some people.
Oh, yeah. I've had so much fun, Michael. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Now, this is one more thing before you go. So, before we go, do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to share?
Oh, gosh. I try to be very humble, but I suppose I can dredge something up from my experience.
You could do it in a
Um,
Shakespearean voice if you want. That's
oh,
okay.
gosh. I'm the worst actor ever, by the way. You need to know that. I got weeded out of everything. So I think my word of wisdom would be to be patient with the self. I talked about, and the world, right? I talked about this healing process that I'm undergoing right now, and there is a process to it, but there's a process for everything in our lives, whether it's relationships with other people, to our jobs, to the planet, to our interior voices that we use to talk to ourselves. Be patient. Be patient with yourself, because the process always will take a little bit longer than you think, but you'll get there. You will get there.
Brilliant words of wisdom. Thank you very much. I think we should all take those to heart. Put them on a note, stick it on your computer, put it on the bathroom wall, stick it on the mirror. So wait, you can always remember, right?
Yes. Yes.
Everything will be in the show notes so they can connect with you, and you can reach out and get your books, get your podcast, and everything else. It's a wonderful podcast. I've listened to it. So take my word for it. It's there.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Everyone out here in the community, just remember that we are still making some changes that are taking place over the next probably month or so. You'll start to notice those, but we still are. One more thing before you go. So please share, subscribe, like, and follow us. And thank you very much for being with us today. One more thing before you all go. Have a great day. Have a great week. And thanks for being here.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go. Check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.